My name's Kelly Giroux-Wilcox. I'm a product manager with ArcGIS Online. We've got Jeremy Bartley over here. You're a program manager?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Thanks, Kelly.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Jeremy. It's my last one. This is number 13. So I'm pretty beat. Program manager for ArcGIS Online and the JavaScript API. I manage the front-end web team for both groups, for the geo parts of the groups, and also involved with the hosted feature services and the web maps back in Arcade.
And can everybody hear me okay? Okay, now a little bit. Do I need to turn it up on the unit?
Is it all?
No, I think again.
What about now? Any better? Maybe I should just talk louder.
There you go.
Okay. And I'm Matt Payne. I'm a product engineer with ArcGIS Online, specifically with configurable app templates.
So today we're going to talk about some best practices and some configuration options for creating layers that are in high demand. So when we look at ArcGIS Online, sometimes your layers and your apps get, 100 requests a day, 200 requests a day, and then sometimes they get millions of requests a day. And there's some different ways in which you want to structure your app and your layers in order to support that load. So we're going to go through some best practices for the UI, UX, how to create a good app, and then we'll go through some of the more technical parts of how ArcGIS Online works to scale to meet really high demand needs. So I'll pass it over to Matt.
Cool. Okay, so as we talk about best practices for high demand layers, today we're going to break this into pretty much two sections. The first of which we'll talk about planning, determining what your message is with your data. We'll talk about who your audience is, who's going to be viewing your data in your apps, and then the experience, which is pretty much the combination of the first two. How will your audience perceive the message that you're trying to get across? And then we'll kind of dive a little bit deeper into the optimization of your data. We'll talk about layers, layer types, and different layer settings, as well as talk about scalability. So layers and maps are the building blocks of WebGIS. A great web app always has great layers and great maps. So you can kind of think of it as layers go into maps, and then maps go into applications. Who is your audience? This might be a few select viewers. This could be maybe just a group that you have a few members in that you're sharing your information with, or it could be GIS analysts, or maybe the entire world. It could be public, anonymous users. Between those two types of audiences, the expectations and the experience is going to be different. Is your audience local citizens who are maybe being affected by an emergency, or is it the actual emergency responders who actually need to act on the emergency itself? Again, those are two different audiences that are going to probably want to have a different experience in an app. And then also think about who might also reference or link to the map. A news outlet or media site could share the app to a website. What that's going to do is it's going to broaden the amount of eyes that are going to be on your information, which leads us into thinking about the unintended audience, and that can really be thought of, the amount of people, the amount of eyes that might be exposed to your app that you maybe didn't think about in the beginning. So it could be people surfing the web, maybe it's people tweeting or retweeting links to your app, or being shared and embedded in different websites. And so the intended experience kind of brings us back to the beginning. What is your message? What is being communicated? And then think about what type of device are users going to be viewing it on. You might optimize an app to be useful in a desktop web browser, but then maybe your users are actually viewing it on a mobile device, or if it goes viral, it could be both. And how you set that up and configure it could be different between web browser or a mobile device. And then you also think about what types of interactions that a user might want with your app. Pop-ups are usually great, but if you enable pop-ups, did you actually go in and configure the pop-up to make sense for the audience and the intended purpose? Do they need to be able to create, edit, or collect information? And enabling editing on a service is a pretty important decision, especially if you're going to share anything publicly. And then, of course, if you are going to add any type of search experience in your app, think about how you've set up and configured that search experience to make sense, specifically for getting your message across to the right audience. Yeah.
Sorry, just on, go back one slide. Yeah, I think don't underestimate this part. And there's lots of different ways like map set on pop-ups and so on. But even just something as simple as the place finder, a little search bar at the top. Esri's got a great global geocoder with data all over the world. But if you are doing a map of San Diego County and your app is navigating that map, maybe those other addresses in Norway aren't really going to help your experience. Now, in a lot of cases, if you're just using, if someone's just typing in based on how close they are to San Diego, you'll get San Diego flavored results. But you could also end up with points of interest by default in the global geocoder. And those points of interest, like Starbucks, are maybe not important if you're building a disaster, response app or something like that, where someone needs to get to an address or something. So you can leverage locator views, and that's a concept in ArcGIS Online. Basically, in the contents page, create a new locator view, and then you can control both the location of the locator, the types of categories, whether you want to search by addresses or just search places or search POIs. You can control all that information about what's exposed in that local geocoder, and then use that geocoder in your application. I think Matt's going to show more about this when he demos, so I'll stop talking. Sorry.
Yeah, for sure. Those are really good points. Yeah, in a bit I'll show in a demo, at least at the app level, how you can make some choices, configuration choices with the search experience. Okay, so once we've considered everything that we've talked about so far, you got to think about, especially if your app might go viral, what is the performance expectation? Will it take layers a long time to load? Will it be really fast, somewhere in between? If the app has any type of processes or things that need to run, will the results take a long time? Will those be fast? So as we plan for an app to go viral, so for today's session, we're going to have the following assumptions. We'll assume that the potential audience is the entire world. This could be public, anonymous users as well. The intended experience will be that a user can figure out how to use the app and tools for the most part without instructions or with minimal instruction, and that no more around 3 clicks to complete an interaction. And then performance-wise, of course, we want it to be fast. So we'll expect that the app loads quickly, no more than around 3 seconds. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show a couple examples using some configurable apps that we have, where we'll do a comparison. Kind of one app will be configured in one way that isn't necessarily set up for a viral audience. Then I'll show a second version of it that's been configured differently in a better way, and then kind of talk about the things, the differences that we made, that are the changes that we made between the two. That did not come up.
Probably need to close out PowerPoint.
Yes, that's it. Okay, so in this first example, this is our new zone lookup application. And when it loads up here, I kind of see that over in the map, I have a lot of data. It's kind of busy. And I don't really necessarily know exactly what's going on. If I look to the left, I see that I can enter an address under this evacuation zone section. When I will look for further details right here, there's some information about what to do, but it doesn't really pertain to what the app is all about. So if I look at a second version of this configured a little bit differently, I see it relatively the same map, but it's not cluttered. There's not really too much going on. I can tell that there's polygons that I could potentially infer are zones, because if I look to the left, I see Know Your Zone with the ability to enter an address or click in the map. If I look for a little bit more detail, this section here has now been customized to be more specific to this app's purpose. So I can enter an address or I can click in the map. I'm just going to choose to click in the map right here. And you can see that what happens is the app zooms to the location that I clicked and it drops a pin in. It also highlights only that zone that I'm within. And on the left side, it gives me that result and tells me what zone I'm in with a link to more information. And now I have a much better opportunity to make a decision based on what I just did. So those changes that I made were at the web map level. And so I'll show you kind of what I did. One of the first things I did was take away some of the layers that we don't necessarily need for this app's purpose. And then I realized that this facilities layer is probably important, but maybe not when we're zoomed out really far. It also clutters the map. So I did something as simple as just setting a visibility range on this. And what that does, if I drag this slider down, I'll just drag it into here for the sake of the demo. This feature layer is still in the map, but it only draws whenever I zoom into beyond the level that I just set. So if I zoom in, they now draw. And so over in the app, we don't start with a cluttered map, and when a zone is found, then it zooms in past that level, and I see the facilities when I need them. So over into our second example here, this is our interactive legend app. And it pretty much is what the title describes. It's an app that allows you to interact directly with the legend, where you can go in and toggle on and off different feature types to display it differently in the map. This app specifically is showing historic plaques in Ireland. And let's say maybe I want to actually search for a specific plaque based on a historic figure name. So if I go up here into the search bar, it says search. And so I start typing in a name that I want to find. And I get this list of suggestions. And suggestions with search are usually, great to have. However, in this situation, I don't really have anything that makes a lot of sense for what I was trying to find. These results are showing in California. And so if you think about having a viral audience looking at your app, think about if a lot of people go in here and they just kind of choose the first option, this is going to take them into California, which is not in Ireland. And now the user experience is really far away from where we actually want them to be. And in this case, a lot of people will potentially give up and maybe not even use the app anymore. So if I look at the second better configured version of this, same web map that's in the app here. But first off, we have this kind of like the feature count here in the legend that shows how many features are showing. We have a total count and then per feature type. So if I interact with it, I have a little bit more of a better usability interaction here where the feature count updates based on what I have. If you zoom in and out, it actually updates on the fly with the extent, which is kind of cool. And so if I go and do the same workflow I just did, I want to search for that specific name. Now it says type historic figure name. And now again, I get a list of suggestions, but these make much more sense to me on what I'm trying to find. And if I choose the very first option, it takes me to exactly what I wanted, and the app gives me a nicely configured pop-up. So these changes were made at the app level. And so this right here is the configuration panel for that app. The first change I made was adding the feature count. This is on the options tab with this checkbox that says enable option to include feature count. And then for making that search experience better, that's over here on the search tab. And the first thing I did was pretty much toggle off any locators that aren't needed, kind of like what Jeremy was mentioning a bit ago. We don't need to search for data in California. We don't need to find postal codes. We really only want our users to look for these plaque locations. And then we always suggest to go in here and edit and kind of refine search options as best as you can in as much detail to give the best experience. So we can enable suggestions off of this, which was that list that we saw in the drop down. You can control how many show. And then also you want to give it a useful display field and then the search field, what we want to search by. Okay, and then now to the last and final example here. This app too is one of our new ones. This is called Attachment Viewer, and you've probably seen it around this week. I know I've seen it circulated on a few monitors. This one specifically is showing splashdown locations of space shuttles, and the app will read in a hosted feature layer that has attachments enabled from the web map, and it shows the attachments associated per feature on the right side in this kind of viewing pane. And you can toggle between features using these arrows up top, and then you can further toggle between multiple attachments per feature using these arrows right here. So for the most part, this app looks pretty good, but when I look to the bottom left for more information about the feature, I'm kind of given this list of not very useful information. Again, think about a viral audience. Not everyone's going to understand what object ID is or be able to do anything with it. We might have some misspelled words in the field names, and then I have to scroll really far to find a lot of information that I might not be able to do anything with. So if we look at the second version of this, it's the same experience, but when I look to the left here, I have a useful, efficient paragraph that gives me only information that I need to know about that feature. And so lastly, that change was made here at the web map level, and that was just configuring the pop-up off of the layer. So if I go to configure pop-up, and then we have the drop-down list here for display type, and I chose custom attribute display, and then you can configure it right here and get that paragraph that looked a lot better. So those are just a few different types of usability decisions that you can make with apps to provide a better experience. And so now what I'll do is I'll turn it over to Jeremy, and he'll dig a little bit deeper into optimizing data and scalability.
4. But just to close on what Matt was saying, I mean, everything you just said is absolutely true. You definitely don't want to be just, if your app's going to go viral, you want it to go viral, and you want to be proud of it, and make sure that your people who are using it really can understand it. And so getting rid of these like attribute lists, if it doesn't make sense, is a really key thing in the pop-up to do. I think you just can't stress enough how important that is. And it actually doesn't take that much time to do that final polish. It's not like it's a huge investment of time, but you can really improve your user's experience of your story or your application immensely by just making a few tweaks at the web map level or at the app config level. So.
Yeah, and those changes, again, for the pop-up, if you spend a little bit of time to set them, they're saved in the web map. So any app that web map is being consumed in will also have those nice pop-ups.
Cool. Thanks, Matt. Okay, let's drill into hosted feature layers. So now you got your app looking good. How can you be assured that it's going to perform really well? Hosted feature layers are a great option. And you can scale your application very easily, and you don't have to do any work. It's like it's online. We take care of it for you. But these feature layers can display a lot of data, and they're powered in the back end by something we call feature tiles. You don't have to do anything about this feature tiles. That's just what's happening for you behind the scenes to give you really good performance. And I'll show you a bit about that in a minute. You can edit this data that you put out public. It's not like a vector tile or in some cases even a raster tile. Once you build that, you are stuck with it until you update it or refresh it. Feature layers are delivering your data as it's being updated. And you can do things like change the visualization, change the renderer. You're not going to have to recook any tiles or anything like that. Of course, feature layers can be used for analysis, and they're hosted by us in the Esri cloud, where we handle the scaling for you, and we also give you a content delivery network. Content delivery network is what allows us to have good performance for all of our customers worldwide. So if I'm in Australia and I'm opening up a web app that's centered around Australia, and I'm making requests all the way to America and then getting the response back, that's going to be slow. And what a CDN gives you is the ability to connect to the closest node. So in Australia, you would stay in Australia and then get the data back there. Now CDNs only apply for public data, so we'll talk about that. But it really makes a huge difference. And I'll show you the optimal way to serve out your public data in the next few minutes. Finally, if you're using a web application from Esri or the ArcGIS JavaScript API, it's automatically HTTPS enabled for online hosted services. So through feature tile queries and response caching, we scale to meet the demand of the audience. Queries from the JavaScript API to large data sets are always sent in a tiled manner. These tiled requests are sent in a way that they're predictable. And so if it's predictable, we can cache those requests. And the way we get scalability, or the way that any system gets scalability, is through caching. And there's different levels of caching that come into play. There's the browser level cache that's specific to you and your browser. There's the content delivery network that I talked about. And then we have another cache within ArcGIS Online, something called a feature tile cache. This is completely hidden to you and opaque. You don't need to know about it. I'm just explaining it to you so that you have the confidence in us for your apps and maps to go viral. And this is how we do it. So if we walk through this, the feature layer requests data from the feature service to draw. This is from the browser. First off, the browser is going to check on that request, that tiled request that I sent. Does the browser cache have the latest data? If it does, I'll send it back and render. If it doesn't, it will go to the content delivery network, if it's public, and see if that has the latest data. It might have the latest data, but the CDN is actually going to go and check, hey, the data that I have, is it still good? And our feature service will respond with, yes it is, or no, here's new data for you. If it is good, then the content delivery network will send that data back to the browser. I should say the browser cache does the same thing that I just described. Then if it makes it all the way to ArcGIS Online, we will check inside the feature tile cache to see, hey, within ArcGIS Online in our caching system, do we have that query? And if we do, send it back. If we don't, we'll go to the last step and actually execute a new query against your database in the cloud. Why do we want to go through all these levels of caching? That's because the thing on the right, while extremely powerful, is also is the hardest to scale. Queries can be very expensive. And it's not, if you think about it, it's actually not just the query part. The database query part might be fine, but a lot of things happen when a feature service is returning data back to you. It's getting raw data out of the database. It's constructing the format that we need to do. It might be reprojecting the geometries to some other projection. It's going to generalize the data based on the clients asking for the data to be generalized. And then it's going to compress the data. All of that put together can add some significant time to those queries. So that's why we want to have the different stages of caching, and we'll drill through that in more detail in a second. Really, the only difference between public layers and private layers is the private layers don't have access to that CDN cache. We don't want to let any of your private data get out without someone having access to it. So let's jump in and do some demos. Okay, so here is a hosted feature layer. A couple things about this. This data is not shared. And if I go to the data tab, we'll see that I made an update at 2:18 today. So that's when this data was last updated. Let's go to the browser and just turn on this zip code layer. We're going to see those queries get sent to the server, and we're also going to see some slower response times. But before we drill into that, I just wanted to call out a few things. So first off, you see that F equals PBF right there in the query? That means we're requesting the data from the feature service in something called protocol buffer format. You don't really need to know about this other than it's the same thing that's used in vector tiles. So you get the same type of compression and optimization for feature service queries as you do with pre-cooking vector tiles. All data through ArcGIS Online, if you're over HTTPS, is served over HTTP2, and that's the next generation HTTP protocol. It actually improves the performance if you are making this number of queries to the same domain. And you'll see in this example, all of these queries are going to services.arcgis.com. Next up, you see the sizes. So to draw this map on the screen, it took 2.1 megabytes of data. So that's how much data had to be returned from the server, compressed format data. We'll come back to the time for a second. Last thing to call out here is that the content encoding. This is how is the data compressed. Is it compressed with gzip or a Brotli? Well, we've migrated to Brotli compression where supported. It's a new, well, it's about a 5-year-old initiative from Google that most of the major browsers support. And it adds about a 5% reduction at this compression level on the data over gzip. So we're trying to get every percentage out that we can. If you happen to have a lot of text, like a big description and each of your values, like a field that's a description, and then you got a paragraph of text in each one, you'll see significantly reduced sizes as compared to gzip. Then this column right here is telling us that we did not get a hit from Cloudfront, which makes sense because this data is private. This column here, this is about whether or not Esri is returning data to us from its cache, from the feature tile cache. In this case, I'm not, because I just made that update to that data. Then the last column to kind of call out is this waterfall. And what you see there is the green at the bottom, that's 7 seconds. That's how long it took before the server responded to the browser. So you can think of that as server time, 7 seconds. And then the amount of time it took to download that query was 373 milliseconds. So the majority of the time is actually in the server processing time. And it's doing everything that I described earlier, reprojecting, creating that compressed format, putting it into protocol buffers, compressing it using Brotli, and then sending it off. But now here's where it gets fun. So let's make the request again. We see a lot faster performance. We see that I'm still getting misses from Cloudfront because it's private data, but all of the requests here are coming back true. So that means it's coming from Esri's feature tile cache. And you see the times are much better. And then I see the good part, which is the download time. Well, it took 3 seconds to download, but it only took 200 milliseconds to actually process the data. Let's do what happens when your data changes. So if we make a update to this data, what happens? Oops. Okay, the data is updated to 258. I'll reload this, and we'll see times similar to the first time through. It's got no feature tile cache, and we're seeing times close to 7 seconds for these queries. Okay, now let's make it public. Okay, the layer is public. I have to toggle this on twice here. I came from the feature tile cache, but it's still a miss from Cloudfront. Let's do it one more time now that we've primed the Cloudfront cache. And we see I get all these refresh hits from Cloudfront. What that means is the request came to Cloudfront. It's checking back to see if the data that it has is still good. We're saying it is, and then it's downloading from a closer node. So slightly better performance. Now, how do we take this to even better performance? Like, we don't want to even make a callback to ArcGIS Online at all. Well, that's where the cache max age setting comes in. So if we go to the settings tab on your feature layer and scroll to the bottom, you'll see something called cache control. This is you have control over this setting, and you're setting it to say, how long do I want the CDN to hold on to my data? And it's going to hold on to your data, and then if it's within that setting, that time period, it won't even check back to see if the data has changed in ArcGIS Online. It will go directly from that CDN. So we set it to 5 minutes. Now this is changing this setting is also a change to the service date modified time. So this first query will be slow again because it's not in CloudFront and it's not in the feature tile cache. But when I do the next one, much faster. All of these queries are coming directly from the CDN. It's never even talking back to ArcGIS Online. So this is probably the most important thing that you can do to have a successful viral experience, and then to also have just in general highest level of performance possible for your non-viral apps. Not everybody has a viral app, but you still want good performance. We recommend to set this in almost all cases. In a future release of ArcGIS Online, we'll set it by default at the organization level. And we'll set it to something like 5 minutes by default. And every new service that gets created will have that set by default if it's served publicly. And then you could still override it, of course, or we'll let the organization administer control that setting. Maybe they don't want to set it at all. Pretty much the only time you don't want to set this is if your data changes, sub 5 minutes, and you want to have a refresh interval to look at the changes. Because you won't see refresh data until this cache is cleared. But this is really the most important thing you can do to improve the performance of your feature layers. Now there's a few other things to call out in this section, and I'll go ahead and zoom. This optimized layer drawing. If you have lines or polygon data, and you can optimize the first query that I made that's not coming from any of the caches by clicking this box. What this box is going to do is going to trigger on the back end creating multiple geometry columns at different scales. And then when we asked for a reduced resolution version of that feature, depending on what scale the map's in, we'll snap to the one that's closest. Now, I'd actually do not recommend using this if you have polygon datas and they're coincident, like those zip codes. That's because we still don't quite have it all figured out, and it introduces slivers between your zip codes, and then your maps will look bad. So we're still tweaking this optimization, and eventually we'll get there so that it's spot on without slivers. But if you've got line features, or if you've got polygons that aren't meant to be coincident with each other, then and they're have lots of geometries, then I would set this. It does add a little bit of more storage size to your feature layer, which of course would cost a little bit more credits, but it's never more than double that size. Now, sometimes something can get out of whack, and we may not. And you may not have a good reason why it got out of whack. And by out of whack, I mean your queries, the first time that when they're coming from the non-cache state, may just be really slow, like 15, 20 seconds. If you ever see that, come to this section and rebuild your indexes. That's usually a sign that the spatial index has got some kind of problem. And by rebuilding this index, you should get much better performance. Now the last thing is not so much on here, but when minimizing that query time when it's not coming from the cache, one of the things that we're actually slowest in is reprojecting data. So we recommend trying to publish the data in the projections that you're going to use it in. And by that I mean, for the most part, if you're using the base maps from Esri, they're going to be in Web Mercator. And it's always going to be in Web Mercator. Then publish them so that the source projection is in Web Mercator or GCS. Now, if you upload data from the website using a shapefile, a CSV, a file geodatabase, we'll actually reproject that data at publish time to Web Mercator. If you're publishing from Pro or ArcMap, that's going to come through a service definition. That will not reproject the data. It'll stay in its source. And so this can be an issue when projecting to a different spatial reference in terms of how long those queries take. Again, it's just the first query that someone makes, because then it would get cached. But in some cases, that can be pretty poor. Now, if you know you're always going to be working with your data on, state plane, Virginia, then keep your data in state plane Virginia so there's no reprojection going on. That's also best in terms of not losing any accuracy. Anything else, Kelly? Did I miss with that?
I think you got it.
Okay. And then I think we talked about, Matt said this, I'll say it, Kelly will say it. Don't turn editing on unless you mean it to be edited. We don't know how many times someone has put something out there for the public and left it editable and then been surprised when somebody wrote some colorful language in their attributes. Or drew some colorful polygons. It can be fun, but definitely don't do it on purpose. We actually put a lot of warnings into ArcGIS Online that if you share a web map that's got an editable layer to the public, we will warn you and say, hey, do you really mean to do that? The other thing is that when you share an editable layer to the public, it can it's going to be slower because we're not going to do any generalization. So the data that you pull from the feature service will be in full resolution. And that can be a much slower. And also can be heavy on our system. So if you've got a map that's going viral and there's an editable layer in it and you don't mean it to be editable, you'll probably be getting a call from Kelly and she'll say, I think you need to turn that off because it's causing problems for us. Yep.
All right. Thanks, Jeremy.
Yep.
I'm number 3. So Jeremy just went through a lot of awesome content in detail. And luckily, you don't need to remember all of it. There's a lot of things about caching and saving your data and optimizing your data. But the tools are all really easy in ArcGIS Online. Jeremy gave you all a really good background in why we make these decisions. But I'm going to go through a quick demo about how to set up your layers so that they are ready to perform in applications. In this demo, basically what I'm going to do is create 2 applications. One for crowdsourcing. We're going to be crowdsourcing San Diego seabird sightings so that you can create a layer and anyone out in San Diego who sees a seabird can take a picture of it and add it to our crowdsourcing app. Then what we're going to do is create a view-only version of this data that's ready to go viral because I know the whole world wants to see all of the seabirds that we have found here in San Diego this weekend. It's going to be an awesome app. I'm pretty sure CNN's going to put it on their news site. So that's really what we're going to do is take a look on how to set up our layers to support both of these workflows, and then also a little bit about how to show the right information. So let's start off with the first, Let's start off with the first layer that I've created. It was really just a blank layer that I built in ArcGIS Online. It's a hosted feature layer. We can take a look at the data. There's a little bit of data in here right now. We can take a look at the fields. You'll see the important fields that I'm collecting are things like a description of the bird, what the bird species is. There's a field for whether or not it's a public feature, and I'll get into that in a little bit. The name of the person who's contributing the data, their email, and their phone. I've also got attachments to allow users to actually submit photos when they see the birds. So if I go back to the table, you'll see that I've collected some of this information, and there's some information in here that's going to be really helpful to me as someone who's managing this app. I can find out who submitted the records. So I've got Beth and Jeremy and Carmen San Diego are submitting some of the records. I've got my email address and I've got my phone number in there, or some phone numbers. So that's great information internally, but it's not necessarily information that I want the public to see for everyone. I don't want this app to be a way to get on the to get off the no-call list or start getting crank calls, even though I do want the users to submit their phone numbers. So what I'm going to do is take a look at the editing settings. Because this is a crowdsourcing app, I am going to break the golden rule and have this app editable to the public. But that's because that's the purpose of the app, is to have it editable to the public. So as you can see, I've turned editing on, so I've enabled editing on this layer. I've got the option to keep track of who created the last updated features. This is just a mechanism to allow me to capture the time that the feature was added, and then also the username if they have logged into ArcGIS Online. I'm going to take a look at what kind of editing is allowed. And as this is going to be a public layer, I really only want the public adding features. So I'm going to remove the ability for users to update features, delete features. They're really only able to add features. I also don't want these users to be able to see the features once they add them. I'm going to want them to go through a triaging process so I can make sure that they're legitimate, appropriate entries before I put them in. So I'm going to select this option that says editors can't see any features, even those that they add. So once they submit the feature, it'll go into a triaging process, and then once it's been triaged, they'll be able to see the feature. So I'll go ahead and I'll select that option. You'll see I've got this cache control, but I'm not able to turn it on. That again is because the layer is editable. You can't use the CDN cache control when a layer is editable. Another reason why you don't want this layer being editable if the purpose is not for it to be edited by the public. So I'll go ahead and save those changes. I've created a map. I've already created a map with it, with the layer. So then we can take a look at this simple application that I have. It's using Geoform, which is a really quick way to put together some crowdsourcing information. And you can see I can input this information. So if I was putting it in, I'm going to say funny bird, a seagull. I'm again going to put my name in. My email, a phone number, and then I'm going to attach the picture of this bird that I see. And I just found a really good one. All right. So I've added it in. I'm going to select my location and submit the sighting. Awesome. Now, if someone were to just view this layer, they wouldn't be able to actually see any of the data that's been submitted. You can see now I can't see any data. It's gone. No one can really see it. So what I'm going to do is now create how to actually create a visible layer from this layer. So if I go back to the original data collection layer, being these San Diego seabirds, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new hosted feature layer view. So this is really just a different way of accessing the same data through ArcGIS Online. So if I go to create a view layer, I'm going to call it Seabird Sightings Display, so I know that this is my display layer. I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And it's really just generating a new pointer to ArcGIS, to the data I've been collecting. So it is the same data set, just a different way of accessing it. I'm going to go through to the visualization tab and set up a couple things to really change the layer to show the information that I want to show. So to do this, I'm going to go to setting a view definition. So this is where I make some setting changes to the actual feature layer so that anyone querying this data can't see the data that I'm going to hide. So I'll go into set view definitions, and I'm going to start by defining the fields. As I mentioned, there's definitely some personal information that I'm collecting in this use case. So what I'm going to do is turn it off for the public layer that I'm going to use. So I'm going to get rid of my creation date, creator, editor date, edit date, editor. And then I also want to get rid of the name, email, and phone number. That's information that I really don't want to be exposed to the public. So I'll go ahead and apply that. And as you can see, I can no longer access those layers. I also have this field that is whether or not this feature is publicly approved. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up another feature layer view, another definition on this layer, so that I can only see content or features that have been approved. So I'll go ahead and I'll set this option to have the public feature, and I'm going to only show it when the value there is yes. So I'll go ahead and apply the definition. And you can see I can only see 2 features now, so only 2 of them have actually been approved. I'll save the layer. Now let's take a look at the settings and how the settings should be. As this is going to be a public layer that I want to be ready to go viral, I don't want editing enabled. I want to be able to take advantage of the CDN. I am going to set up this cache control so that it's updating about every 5 minutes. I'll go ahead and save the layer. Excellent. Next, I'm going to create a triaging layer. So this is really a layer that is meant to be shared just within the organization so that the triagers of this application and this data can actually look and update those fields where we actually want the features to show. So it's really changing that value from no to yes when it's appropriate. So I'll go ahead and hit OK. I'm going to allow this layer to be editable. But it's not going to be shared outside of my organization. So only users in my organization are going to be able to edit this layer. So if I take a look at the triage layer, I'm going to go down to the bottom of this. I'm going to enable editing. It's OK to add, update, and delete features because this is really a triaging layer that we're going to use. So that you can add, update, and delete features. And we'll go ahead and take a look here. And you'll see that as editing is now enabled and saved, I can't enable the CDN. So I'm not going to do that I'm not going to enable cache control for this layer. If I then go to the Data tab, I can take a look at the newly submitted features which have the public feature value of no. So if we take a look at this, it looks, oh great, it just says funny bird, seagull. I'll take a look at the picture, see how it looks. Oh great, it is actually Scuttle from The Little Mermaid. Fantastic. I'm going to say that's OK. So I'll go ahead. Oh, yeah, I like that one. Say yes. Because I've turned the cache control on to 5 minutes on my other layer, we're going to have to wait about 5 minutes until this new feature is pushed over. I'll go back to our display app. I'm going to go back to the display app and set up an app so that we can easily see these new layers. So I've got my display app. I'm going to create a map. We'll see how many features we can see right now. I bet you it's 2. Oh, we've got my 3rd layer in there already. So we've got 3 features in here. I'll go ahead and save this as a map. And I'm going to quickly make one of the apps that Matt has already shown, being the attachment viewer. So I want to share this with everyone. I'm going to create a web app. It's noticed that my layer is not shared with everyone. So I'm being prompted to share this layer with everyone because we want the layer and the map and the app to have the same sharing capabilities. I'll go ahead and update the sharing, select the attachment viewer, and create the web app. All right. So as you can see here, I've got an app quickly created, and it's going to show, it's going to allow me to go through the features and just see those seabirds that I have added. It's pretty easy. I'm going to go ahead and launch the application and save it. I can actually just go with the default configurations. Awesome. These apps are ready to go. So Jeremy was showing us a lot of really cool tricks with the developer tools and how to see what those caching levels are. But one of our developers has actually created an add-in with Chrome that will be available in the Chrome Web Tools store that helps you easily understand if your layer and your app have been configured to scale. So I guess we're going to test it out and see how I did on this display app. So if I'm going to open up Developer Tools and this ArcGIS Health extension. So what I can do is refresh this layer, and you'll see a few things. One, I'm getting some information about the queries that are being sent. I see that the cache control is set to 5 minutes, and I see that I've got quite a few non-cacheable queries and a few CDN hits. I'm going to give it another refresh. And you can see this time, similar to how Jeremy was looking at it earlier, I've got basically all green. So all of my requests to the server are hitting the CDN. So I know this app is ready to go viral. If I take a look at the GeoForm app, where I know editing has been enabled, we can take a look at some of the warnings that we actually get with this application. So one, I've got this alarm that the service is editable. It's okay, this is my purpose. I'm going to ignore that because that's what I wanted to do. You can also see that I don't have the cache control enabled. This is one of the best practices that we suggest for viral apps. If you click the I button, it'll actually take you to the documentation about how to enable the cache control. And you can see that all of these queries that I'm making are not cacheable. So I know that this isn't prepared to withstand a huge load. Usually when it's a crowdsourcing app, you don't have people refreshing it every 2 seconds. So usually it's fine with a crowdsourcing app, but it is something to keep in mind when you are building crowdsourcing applications. All right.
I'm going to show it with the...
Do you want me to do that?
Yeah, do that.
Okay. Or do you want to do it?
I don't have the thing.
Okay. So as another example, I guess, of just how this is configured on another app, I've just got to find
Living Atlas.
Thanks. Perfect. So here's another application that we currently have working, and that's monitoring one of the hurricanes that we have. If we take a look at the health check, you can see that it's configured in a way that's going to scale. And this is one of our trending apps right now. I think we're getting about like 10,000 hits an hour, 20 minutes. We're getting a lot of traffic on this. I just can't come up with a number right this second. But as you can see, with the cache control, it's set to 5 minutes, just like we've specified. We're getting CDN hits, and all of the queries so far are not cacheable. So they're all cached queries. So this is ready to take the load that is available. If I zoom in, we can take a look and see where those other queries are. So some of the queries here are being cached, and some of them are non-cacheable queries. This could be from the CDN or the CDN refreshing. So it's something that we'd take a look at again. I'll refresh it.
This data is from Living Atlas live feeds, which it's updated, all the time. Mm-hmm. So, but it has a good job setting a 5-minute cache control.
Yeah.
And it's looking pretty good.
So we can see we do the same thing again, and most of these queries are in fact cached.
Yep.
You have anything else to add, Jeremy?
It's a cool app. I think it's about to go out.
I think it's out, isn't it?
It's out? It's out, right?
Yeah,
Janelle?
it's out. It's trending.
It's trending.
People are looking at it. So that's a little bit of an example of how to take a look at caching and hosted feature layers. The other option that you do have are hosted tile layers with ArcGIS Online. We used to recommend using hosted tile layers when apps went viral, but there's been so many changes in all of this work done on the caching infrastructure that it's not needed all that often. As Jeremy mentioned, the hosted tile layers, whether they are vector tile layers or raster tile layers, you need to cook those layers and pre-generate them before they're ready to be shared. Whereas with feature layers, they're more dynamic and can update easier. So when would you actually want to use a hosted tile layer as an operational layer? You want to do it when you're drawing a lot of data that's not responding fast enough. If you've got static data that's not updating, like base maps, it's also a great time to use hosted tile layers. And then, base maps. You have an option with hosted tile layers to buddy them up with a feature layer so that you can use the tile layer for visualization and then use the feature layer just to query the information underneath. So this is a great way of getting really fast visualization with raster layers and then also that feature information with the tile layer. We'll take a quick look at what this looks like and comparing them. So I'll just refresh this, and these are two apps, and as you can see, I've got hosted feature layers and hosted tile layers. So you can take a look at which one loads fastest. So we've got the tile layers, it's all rendered. And we've got the hosted feature layer, it's coming a little slower. Although that performance might be okay, this is one of those situations where I'd prefer to just have a tile layer because it loads just like this. It really is dependent on when you want to see this data or how you want to see the data. If you zoom in and see more data, you can see that it starts drawing faster and faster on the feature layer side. So it's really kind of up to you whether your data is performing at the speed that you want, whether or not you want to use tile layers. Back in the day, I used to use this as my cautionary tale of what happens when you have a lot of vertices in a layer. So this is the feature map of polygons, and it's got a lot of vertexes in it, especially up in Canada and Greenland. It's a pretty complicated data set to draw on the layer. But we'll just compare how quickly these draw. So we've got the feature layer. That was pretty quick. And we can take a look at the tile layer. Again, pretty quick. I'd say that the performance difference there is negligible. So it would really be kind of up to you on which you would want to use, whether it would be a feature layer or a tile layer that you would want to use. The feature map used to take probably about 3 to 4 seconds to draw in, but now they're basically the same. All right. So kind of to round this out, here's a checklist of what you want to do when you are creating an app for a viral audience. 1, disable editing on all public feature layers unless you plan to do editing. 2, you want to have your feature layers projection map match the base map to prevent reprojection. Again, that can cause a lengthier time for your data to draw. Set a cache control interval which aligns with your data update schedule. So that's setting it for 5 minutes, 3 minutes, an hour if it's not updating very often. Ensure all layers and links use HTTPS. There is a trend, and it's happening, to move all to HTTPS. But even now, browsers like Chrome are flagging HTTP-only layers as insecure, and you run into mixed content. So it's time to start using HTTPS only if you haven't. You want to use tile layers for static data. You only want to include tools and layers that are relevant to your intended message. If you don't need to have your users going through 6 base maps, don't include the base map gallery. Maybe just use a base map toggle. Ensure that the interactive experience is intuitive and understand, and test your app and test it again. It's really important that you test your app and you test your app by your audience. I was mentioning to the last group, I always get my mom to test out my really simple apps because she can't make anything work for the life of her. And if she can make the app work and if she can understand it, then I know it's a good app for a general audience. She's also not on my network. She doesn't have any login information. So she's always a good person to just kind of test who hasn't already checked out who hasn't been looking at the app over and over again and might run into browser caching issues.
Just along those lines,
Yep.
Kelly, also when you
It's good to try the app in incognito mode in your browser, or maybe in another browser that you haven't signed in. So like if you're usually using Chrome, you might switch over to Firefox, try it. That'll just catch any items that might not be shared at the same level, so that your people aren't getting sent to a sign-in page when you really meant them to be actually looking at it. We try to catch those where possible, but there's still cases that can kind of float under the radar where not everything is shared at the correct level and cause people to sign in.
All right. And so that is all. Please share your feedback. And we've got a couple minutes for questions. Any questions? Oh. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I wonder how you got to the health check. I didn't catch that. You could see the performance and what it was hitting.
Yeah, so that's an add-in. It's not released yet, but it will be available in the Chrome store in the next month or two.
I think look for a blog. Follow the blogs.arcgis.com and look for the product blog. We'll announce it there, tweet about it, and try to spread the word.
Yeah. Yeah.
If I have a feature class that is posted and it is infrequently updated, maybe once a day or twice a day sort of thing, but then there's suddenly an issue where, well, this really needs to be updated because there's an error and it needs to be fixed or whatnot, is there a manual refresh button for the feature tab?
So the question is on if I have data that normally is not updated, but no, some critical came in and it needs to be updated. Well, if we're not using the CDN, if we're talking about private data, then it'll always be up to date as soon as you make that edit. If we're talking about CDN and you've set that cache max age to somewhere between 5 minutes and an hour, actually in the UI that's all we expose: 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 30 minutes, and an hour, something like that. There's no way to force it to refresh. But, set it to 5 minutes. 5 minutes won't be the end of the world.
There's a 3-minute too.
There's a 3-minute?
Yeah.
Not in the UI.
I think so.
Nope.
Okay. Wrong.
One more, yeah.
When did you use a hosted tile layer?
When would we use?
When would it?
Oh, hosted tile layer? Well, I wouldn't use it unless you were looking at really big data, like 2 million points, let's say, or that would be the only time I would use it, personally.
Yeah. Or most of the time, the other reason that you might want to use it, but I'm going to say it's probably a bad practice, is let's say you had like an entire road network of the U.S. It's not going to draw great at a small scale. Honestly, I'd say don't show that data at a small scale. Show it once you get zoomed in, just like what Matt was showing. But I don't know, if you really wanted to show it there, then maybe use a tile layer. But
the reason why not to, it's just a lot of work, and there's lots of things that can just cause problems. Whereas the feature layer, has gotten so much better. In fact, I just showed in one other session. I remember working on the JavaScript API at version 3.0 or something like that, when we first drew all the counties in the U.S. in a feature layer. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, we can draw all the counties in the U.S., it's so amazing. And then now we could draw all 30,000 zip codes in the U.S., and it draws at the same speed as it did back then. So it's really, really moving forward. All right, I think we're out of time, but thank you.
But thank you, yep.